We're still talking a lot about it, but the main focus we want is, we've shown a lot of Battle.net earlier today. We had a big presentation on it, and really the focus is a social networking focus, where you can communicate with people across games. And so that's something that definitely Diablo 3 will have. When you play Diablo 3, you'll be able to talk to your WoW friends and your StarCraft 2 friends and jump back and forth pretty easily. We also really want a much more verbose friend system, ability to kind of communicate a lot more easily with more kind of a modern communication style, more like an IM Messenger or Facebook, something like that. We also want players to be able to kind of what we call instant join, which is add a much better matchmaking system. There is matchmaking Diablo 2, but it's a little esoteric. We want, a button that you push that just throws you into a game right next to somebody at your level doing the same thing. And then being able to also just kind of jump in with your friends whenever you want. So there's a lot of features that we're focusing on, and that's probably just a fraction of them. Because Battle.net development for us has not started really heavy yet.
All right, on to another Twitter question. This one comes from Halogen. He says, will the dungeon levels from the first Diablo make a comeback?
The actual levels themselves?
I guess, yeah, because he knows it's going back to Tristram. So
the levels that we showed last year are meant to be the same dungeon that existed in the original Diablo. And obviously, it looks a lot different. It's 15 years later in terms of technology. So we got some new tricks in 15 years. But we did try to look at some of the elements of those dungeons and figure out ways to put them in there.
Excellent. Okay, cool. All right, we've got another one here coming from Twitter here. This is one, how will you try and make gold more important than in Diablo 2, says Julie Cater.
That's funny, we get this question a lot, and they're like, wow, have you guys figured it out? And it's not a magic trick. It's not easy, but knowing how to do it is not the problem. It's actually the implementation of it. So all you have to do, like it's really easy. All you have to do is basically figure out your how much money you want to go into the economy, and then how you can take that same amount of money out of the economy. And Diablo 2 didn't. Diablo 2 kind of flooded the economy with gold, and it was kind of their policy, was we're going to throw gold at the player because it's a fun reward. But when it's meaningless, it's actually not. So that's what we have to do, and the question is, how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to focus on a lot of crafting systems, things like that, which will basically be gold sinks for the player. So most of that stuff we haven't really talked about or announced yet, but when we get around to it, players will see we have a lot of things that are going to pull gold out of the economy that will make it useful. The last thing we can fall back on is to actually tone down the amount of gold that we're dropping as well.
You mentioned earlier that most of your major questions have been answered internally, enabling you to really ramp up production. What was the most difficult and challenging major question that you've had to answer over the last year since we saw you last time? Well,
the problem is we still have some pretty big announced features, and one of them in particular was actually a pretty big bear for us, but since it's not announced, can't talk about it. So I would probably say the class choices. Everyone's got an opinion about them, and everyone's really emotional about them. And it's tough to kind of get the right kind of tone. I mean, one of the things we talked about a lot early on was we like fighting games a lot on as you can probably tell by the monk on the team. And so we looked at fighting games a lot and said, oh, let's make characters like that. And a lot of fighting games, the key is the characters are they're very niche oriented. So they can appeal to a tiny, tiny part of the audience because you're going to have 20 or 30 characters. And so we kind of had to learn early on that we're only going to have probably 5 characters. And since that's the case, we really got to make sure that they are different and unique, but also appealing enough that they'll capture 20–25% of the audience.
Now, another question for you, Jay. A lot of people are actually asking this on Twitter. Which is your favorite class right now in the game?
I go back and forth. Everyone thinks the Barbarian's my favorite class. And I do really like I love the Hulk, and I love anything that smashes a lot. I have to say right now it is the Monk, which is not uncommon for us, because whenever we put a new class in, it becomes everyone's favorite class for a little while. But most of the time, if we're going to average out over time, like who is my favorite it's usually the Wizard. I just think that she's got a really interesting kind of contradiction in how fragile she is. She's got to stay away from the enemies, but she's got a lot of really cool skills for dealing with enemies, not just attack skills.
Yeah.
And I like that when we can make a class not just focus on attacks, but also have some escape skills and some defensive skills that players not only use, but actually appreciate and enjoy.
Right. Very visually interesting.
All right, time for one more question for you here, Jay. This one comes from, well, a lot of people are asking about Magic Find and how that's going to be used in the game. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so it's our intention to keep Magic Find in the game because as a system, we think it's fun to basically find a way to amp up your chance at magic items and to pay some kind of cost for that. But the cost that was paid in Diablo 2 was not a good one. Too often, it was so item focused that people would build their entire characters and all their items around Magic Find, and even build their class choices and do their item hunting with particular classes, in most cases the sorceress. And we don't want that at all. We don't want players to build their entire item base around Magic Find. So we haven't really tackled the problem specifically because it's not one that we have to kind of solve too early. Itemization tends to come later in the process. Once you've kind of got all your environments and your monsters and tuning done, then you go through and layer in kind of dense itemization. So, but we definitely want to get rid of those Diablo 2 problems, even if it means Magic Find gets taken completely off of items.
Interesting. All right, well, we'll have to stay tuned for more info on that. Well, Jay, thank you so much for joining us. We'll look forward to hearing a lot more about Diablo 3 here at BlizzCon, playing it right next to us, the stage there, and we can't wait to hear more, I'm sure, next year at BlizzCon.